The question is, could it happen? Could you have this kind of a holy war between the king of the north and the king of the south? Well, let me just tell you a little bit about different viewpoints. End of the world viewpoints of Sunni Muslims. This is the Muslim Brotherhood, and Palestinians are part of this group. There will be a war in Syria, and folks, there's been a war in Syria going on for a long time, and they think that was it. Out of that, the world will go into chaos, and God will help them win a war, and the whole world will become Muslim. Jesus will show up and help them conquer Al-Quds, Jerusalem. Well, actually, they get Al-Quds, Jesus shows up, and he takes out the Dajjal, which is an Antichrist-type character. And Islam has control of the world. Shia Muslims, which are Iranian, believe a 12th Imam will show up, which is a holy man that went down a well back in the 9th or 10th century, and he's going to come back out of the well, and he's going to lead them to victory in a time of great chaos. So the Iranian government feels that they need to get this world into chaos so that God can rescue them. Does that start to explain a few things? Now, this was back in 2012. The Muslim Brotherhood Supreme Guide Muhammad Badia confirmed the necessity for every Muslim to strive to save and to cleanse Palestine from the clutches of the occupation, deeming this an individual duty for all Muslims. The Israelis are the rapist, although you just watched it going the other way. And it's the job of every Muslim to save the land of Palestine from the Israelites, the Jewish people. Does it help explaining what you're seeing? The Iranian-Syrian crisis prelude to coming of the Mahdi, the 12th Imam. A high Iranian politician believes the Syrian revolution could be the catalyst for sparking a worldwide conflagration that will usher in an era of Muslim domination of the world. And the Syrian conflict has catapulted Iran as the chaos maker of the Middle East. Prophecies of Mary predict an Islamic Antichrist. Book Thunder of Justice, written right before the year 2000, indicating that several things were going to happen and Jesus was going to set up his kingdom about the year 2000. That didn't happen. It's a Roman Catholic book. But these prophecies of Mary, there was a very interesting one. Well, in it, that they believe that there is going to be a Muslim Antichrist, and it just sounds like a description of the 12th Imam. Then there's many evangelicals and talk show hosts are now teaching that the Antichrist will be Muslim, just like Mary did. Supposedly Mary, okay? And these dreams and visions that some of these Catholic prophets or seers have had. Glenn Beck, Walid Shoebat, Joel Richardson, Joel Rosenberg, and others all see a role of a Islamic Antichrist. Now, we have Daniel 11:40-43, that Islam and its allies attack the papacy. And we have a three-way division of Islam after the papacy and its allies strike back. The three parts are those who escape, Egypt and many other countries that are overthrown, and those who follow after the king of the north. In other words, they say, hey, we don't like radical Islam either, we'll cooperate with the Christian world. Almost every conflict, there have been some Muslims that have done that. Let's take a look at an old map. Here's Egypt. I do believe that Egypt will further radicalize and go down. Does anybody here know who won the last really free election in Egypt? Mohamed Morsi the Muslim Brotherhood candidate, the radical Muslim candidate that wants to conquer Israel. But a year later, less than a year later, the Egyptian military overthrew him, and there hasn't been a free election since. Oh, there have been elections. But whoever runs against El-Sisi runs from a prison cell. Huh. That sounds interesting, doesn't it? You put the opposition in prison before the election. If you were to have a free election today, after what just happened in Palestine and Israel with the Palestinians, the Brotherhood would probably win again. Libya, North Africa, several countries. Actually, some of these are the ones joining the Abrahamic Accords normalizing relations with Israel. Ethiopia, down here. And ancient Ethiopia was this whole area. Many of these would actually like to work together with the Christian world, and they're tired of radical Islam. And so it's already kind of shaping up like Daniel saw. I do expect Egypt to do a turnaround, but how might this happen? The U.S. rises to support the King of the North, and out of the French Revolution comes Marxist socialism, which is supportive of the King of the South. That's what I presented last night. All these powers arise in the late 1700s, and by the mid-1800s, everything was in place. What does that tell me? The time of the end conflict could have happened any time since then.
Oh, wow.
We've basically been living on the verge. We're living in the time of the end during this time period when Jesus could come at any time. We need to be ready. In 2011, I wrote a book, Islam and Christianity and Prophecy. I had some expectations. I had studied it very carefully and how it had been fulfilled without ever missing a detail as written for 2,500 years. Starting in Daniel's time, never misses a detail, and it's in sequence. And I figured if I just keep using the same methods and move into the future, I can get a general idea of what's coming. And so I said, there's going to be a radical Islam that angers the papacy. Well, I saw a radical Islam, a moderate Islam, and a group that follows Jesus in the prophecy. I now understand that radical Islam to be the caliphate people. The papacy would call for war against radical Islam. The United States and its allies would be the military enforcer. Radical Islam would be overthrown. Moderate Islam would follow the papacy, and some Muslims would follow Jesus and the Bible. In 2011, that wasn't happening. This is what I was saying was coming. In 2014, it began to happen and just click off one right after another, which tells me we're entering the whirlwind of the time of the end. And what I'm going to show you now, beginning in 2014, in date order, is how the whirlwind has been unfolding. All right? To have a king of the north versus king of the south conflict, you have to have a king of the south, a caliphate, a caliph. We hadn't had one since the Ottoman Empire, a functioning one. But on July 1, 2014, in print, a functioning caliphate was introduced. The Islamic State. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the caliph, the self-proclaimed leader of the Islamic State stretching across Iraq and Syria, has vowed to lead the conquest of Rome as he called on Muslims to immigrate to his new land to fight under its banner around the globe. Now remember, I'd said that there's going to be a radical Islam that angers the Pope, and the Pope will call for war. Day one of the King of the South existence, he says, I'm after Rome, the King of the North. Oh, that was convenient. I didn't know it was going to be that blatant, but it was. The next question is, how long would it take for the papal king of the north to call for war? I mean, the Pope is the man of peace, right? Unless you know the history. But that's what he likes to be called. It only took 5.5 weeks for the Pope to call for war. August 7, 2014. Pope Francis appealed to world leaders on Thursday to help end the crisis in northern Iraq after a sweeping advance by radical Islamic State militants forced thousands of residents of Iraq's biggest Christian town to flee their homes. His Holiness addresses an urgent appeal to the international community to take action. He was calling for military action to end the humanitarian tragedy now underway. The very next day, Obama comes out and says, America is coming to help. Within 36 hours of the papal call for action, the United States began attacking the Islamic State for the first time. That should put us into the third and final holy war, which is called the whirlwind. Once the king of the north, the Pope, calls for action. The Pope called for action, we have the Crusades. He calls for action, you have the Holy League against the Ottomans. He calls for action, you should have the third and final round. I mean, it's just Daniel is just so systematic, boom, 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 right through, all the way. Now, some of the American media began to say, oh man, the United States didn't really listen to the Pope. He was probably wanting humanitarian action, not military action when he called for action. So this is 6 days after the papal call for action, and the United States has been hitting the Islamic State for a couple of days now. And the Pope comes out and says, oh no, I really did want military action. The Holy See's ambassador to the United Nations, Silvano Tomasi, this weekend supported U.S. airstrikes aimed at halting the advance of Sunni Islamic State militants, calling for intervention now before it's too late. While the Vatican vocally disapproved of the U.S.-led campaign in Iraq in 2003 and the 2013 plan for airstrikes on Syria, fearing both might make the situation worse for Christians on the ground, fears of ethnic cleansing by Islamists, the Caliphate people that want to set up their capital in Al-Quds, Jerusalem, has forced a policy change. Daniel 11 says the king of the south pushes and forces the king of the north to come back. That's exactly what the papacy just admitted happened.
What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, yours truly is challenging my theory here. Yeah, he mentioned the Ottoman Empire having a caliphate, but never one that was established until 2014.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that goes to the point where Brother Ulrich was saying, you know, if you say it's the Ottoman Empire, where do you place them now prophetically? So it makes sense if there was a reestablishment of a caliphate in 2014, then that would line up with the rest of the prophecies.
Right.
So I guess it can be explaining the pushback from the king of the north. It's like the king of the north pushes and the king of the south steps away and then comes back in and push back at the king of the north, back and forth. So there is this back and forth between those two powers.
Right.
Well, what I noticed that he is not getting rid of the interpretation that we had.
Right.
He's not replacing, he's adding to it in a sense.
Right.
So I mean, I can work with that. I don't mind that, but
I think it's reasonable.
Yeah. When he backed it up with the radical left and he shows the radical left stands behind King of the South. And he's like, but if you look at it, guys, no matter which direction we look at this thing, both groups are fighting for church and state union.
Yes, and that's what got me. That's the part that got me.
Yeah. So he's like, I mean, we are caught right in the middle here, man.
Yeah.
So
By the way, the Ottoman Empire, and this is just doing just a brief look in terms of the history. The Ottoman Empire has been in decline for centuries now, and really what's left of the Ottoman Empire, there was what was called the Franco, actually the Turco, maybe Russia war, basically the war between Turkey and Russia. Russia was because the Ottoman Empire was really the dominant religion was Sunni Islam. Russia provided pushback because they were against the persecution against maybe Orthodox Christians, and the Eastern, the other Eastern Bloc countries in Europe provided actually took issue with that as well. So again, I think that what Tim lays out is that you really have a first wave, second wave, as imperialism is really developing in terms of what is representatively north of Israel, right? And I think that he makes a solid case to help us really understand the geopolitical dynamic.
I agree. No, I mean, for me, again, he's bringing up, as you say, receipts, right? So he's bringing up the dates. He's bringing up, hey, this is when this happened. This is when this took place. I thought it was very interesting. The papacy called for action. The U.S. responded. He's about to say something here, but I'm not going to say it, but he's about to say something here that I thought was very eye-opening on how radical Muslims view Americans, and specifically American soldiers, in light of their action towards them. I think he mentions it in this presentation, so maybe he's going to say in a few minutes. Here you go.
Then Jihani John starts calling the United States and Obama the dog of Rome.
There it is.
The United States is the attack dog for Rome. Interesting. The United States and the Vatican worked together to bring down communism in 1990, but it's reared back up again. They've worked together to bring down the Islamic State, but it's rearing back up again. What do you expect they're going to do? They'll come together to fight both of them together now, eventually. And according to the Huffington Post, but shrewdly, methodically, and with a showman's flair, the soft-spoken 78-year-old Argentinian Jesuit priest named Pope Francis showed Thursday that he is running to become president of the planet. He came to the U.S. Congress and spoke to a joint session of Congress. Not very many people get that opportunity. He went from there up to the UN and spoke at the UN. Putin was there, Obama was there, but who pulls the coverage of the press? The Pope does. So who's the important one? The one that gets the coverage. Get this. In the Crusades, there's a violent form of Islam on the march, and the world unites behind the papacy to stop it. During the Ottomans, there's a violent form of Islam that's on the march, and the world unites behind the papacy to stop it. What do you think's going to happen in our modern world when there's a violent form of Islam on the march? Every time there's a violent form of Islam on the march, the papacy rises in power to counter it.
oh boy. All
It's
right.
happening all over again.
Yeah, he's dropping truth bombs here, brother, man. Well done, man. Ooh, love it. All right. Right. He said, the United States pretty much listens to the voice of the papacy.
Yeah.
And we right now, conservatives and the right wing of the political spectrum will look at things and say, the United States is like the puppet of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Mm-hmm.
Just about anything Israel asks for, they get. What he said here is massive.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that is because the voice of the papacy, it's pretty much compelling some of these decisions politically and some of the policies that are being written to side along with Islam.
Right.
Because when you notice who is in political positions that are siding with the president to agree to go and do this and do that, many of them are Roman Catholics. Now, that's beside the fact. Let's move on to what he said as far as the papacy is concerned. We know the papacy never had an army, all right? Those nice looking young men with those yellow looking clothing on them, these guys can't go to war, okay? These guys only sit at Rome. They can't go to war for nobody. So they need an army. And when you read Revelation, I mean, Daniel chapter 11, you read it earlier. There were 3 things that were given to the king of the north.
Right.
And that's actually one of my studies as well. So
Let me see if I can pull it back up here.
if you can pull that back up, shall speak marvelous things. The king of the north shall trouble him.
So that's verse
40.
Yeah. And at that time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships.
Okay, so there is the whirlwind, which means rapidity.
Right.
But there are 3 things mentioned here: chariots with whirlwind, chariots, horsemen, and many ships. So chariots and horsemen, that's like an army.
Yeah.
That's what we call that today. Today we call that, that's what we call a military apparatus, or there's a better term for it, is military industrial complex, right? Right. You got all these terms. Anyway, so they don't have that. So they have to get it from somewhere.
Right.
The United States is that place. But the many ships also has to do with money. Oftentimes that was used as a mean to fund things. The ships had to do with trades,
Right.
economics, and so on like that. So that will mean the United States will also fund it. So it's not just not like they give the army only; they also fund for these wars to take place,
but
at the backing and the cause of the papacy. Even though Israel may be the front man, but behind the scene, the whoever is dictating these wars, who's saying go, by all means make it happen, it has to be Rome.
Yeah. So, doesn't that parallel with Revelation 13?
Yes,
it's the same thing.
I talk about verse 11, or just they making an image to the beast.
Well, we know that the second beast is making an image, and it's doing the biddings of the first.
Correct.
So it's the second beast is the enforcer of the policies of the first beast in Revelation 13.
Yeah, the first beast is nothing without the second beast.
Right. A lot of people get it.
Needs the civil power.
Yeah.
It is ecclesiastical in nature.
Right.
But it lacks the civil. It lost the French Revolution, which was the civil power it once controlled.
Right.
Back then. So out of the French Revolution, the deadly wound was inflicted, no longer have the civil political influence that it once had. Now where is he gonna get it again?
Yeah.
The next greatest, who is the world superpower today?
It's deep, man, because a lot of people, when we study Revelation 13, they think, oh yeah, the papacy is going to do all these things. Well, where do you see in Revelation 13 the papacy doing any of that? It's the second beast doing that. The papacy's in the background saying, yeah,
it's creating the policies.
Right. So if we're seeing the same thing again, if your interpretation of the king of the north in Daniel 11 is that it's the papacy, it has to line up with Revelation 13. Where's the king of the north getting the chariots, the horsemen, the many ships? It would have to be from the same place, which is the United States. And then again, so now when we're reading prophecy, we have to look at what the Bible says and then how it matches up in real time. He just brought up that, hey, 2014, papacy says, hey, we need to do something about radical Islam. America went and did it. It's to the point where I hope y'all caught that the leader of the radical Islamic group called Obama, who was the president at the time, the dog of Rome. In other words, you know, so Rome says, and this is not to, you know, disrespect, but Rome says sick 'em, and the United States go get some. And so wait a minute. So they can recognize the connection between the United States and the papacy.
That's
But does not prophecy say exactly that?
Yes.
So so far, this is making sense to me. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm 80% in agreement with him thus far. Yeah, I think the other 20% is just a little bit more listening that needs to take place because I can't disagree with him. Yeah, go ahead. What are you?
This is just one quick point, and I'm backtracking on purpose because, you know, earlier in the comments there were some comments relative to that, you know, when the traditional view of saying, of recognizing that you know, that the king of the north was Turkey, right? And then say, well, we flip it if we say, well, no, that Turkey is north of, obviously that geography is north of Israel, but you actually have a first wave and a second wave and a fourth wave of kind of king of the north, right? And a king has a kingdom, so it's a kingdom, it's a system, it is policy, it comes with a certainly imperialistic power. The interesting thing is that I think Uriah Smith, in his book Down Revelation, there is talk about the method of interpretation that Adventists have used, right? And obviously, we look at you know, the historical grammatical method. So there are things that you look at and you recognize, obviously, that this is talking about literal, you know, literal things, and you apply that based on, of course, a historicist view. The interesting thing is the caution is to say that, well, you're flipping it here, is that, take for instance, in Luke 21, Jesus, in setting up, the disciples ask him, what shall, you know, these things be, like in terms of the last days? And he says, he kind of gives them a litany of things. But one thing he says, when you see Jerusalem compassed about with armies, right, as a sign of the last days. Now, it's not the last days in terms of the end of the world, but the last days for the nation of Israel, right? And he says, when you see Jerusalem compassed about with armies, and so we know that Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's the near fulfillment. We make a second application where Ellen White herself says that Jerusalem represents the world.
Right.
So the world will be destroyed. So, and then she makes an application. She says 1888 was similar to that of Jerusalem compassed about with armies. So I think that you know, again, I just say that we need to be humble enough and open-minded enough to really, I think, look at and really study Daniel 11, ask for God's Spirit, and I think give Brother Tim a hearing and see how this tracks, I think, really well with I think it stays within the boundaries of a historical grammatical method.